Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started. All right, Dr. Ludlow, welcome to the studio.
Oh, thank you. This is fancy.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It feels so good.
It feels great.
In the cart, by the way, for all who are listening. So, welcome. I've been so happy that you have agreed to be on this show. I know that you just...
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about it, but, hopefully I won't embarrass myself. It'll be okay. It'll be all right.
So, a little bit of background just for our listeners on who you are. So, you and I was trying to think about it on the way over here today. We've worked together for...
Like, it was probably, 2015? Has it been that long? 16? Something like that?
I think so. It may have been,
Well, it was definitely before we moved, and we moved in 19, so...
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, so we've been around the block a few times.
Yeah, we've seen a few things.
We've seen a few things together.
Yeah.
But you have, and I know you and I talk about this all the time, but you have a very unique practice in that it is massive.
It feels big sometimes, yeah.
You ask me every once in a while, like, it's big? It's big. It's real big.
Because I was thinking, how many employees do I have? And... the answer is I don't even quite know. I have to look it up. So, but right. We have 5 doctors, 6 hygienists, and then probably another 14 assistants and front desk people. So almost 30 employees. Yeah. Total.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's big, but it feels big.
It's huge. Yeah, it's pretty huge. Big. And what's really interesting is big and still privately owned. So
totally.
There's no corporate involved. It's you and. You added on your partner, and
it's
y'all
me,
slugging it out.
A partner, and then 3 associates, and just slugging it out, showing up every day and getting beat up, as sometimes happens in the dental world. But we've been real fortunate, really blessed. It's a cool little office that we have up there.
It's a cool big office. It's a cool office.
Yeah,
and I think it's been fun to watch it grow over these last 9 or 10 years. It's it's a small community that has blown up. That community really has. And you were the first one out there. Well,
first
there was
one. Nope.
Yeah, it was.
I was the very first one. There was only one strip center in that whole city, and there was 1,600 space available for lease. I called on it, took it, and then now we have a Walmart up there. So
yeah, I mean,
big
deal now.
It's a big deal. So I was the first one in the town. We started with 2 chairs and hitting 19 years this year. And now we're up to 16 operatories.
Yeah, and out of space.
And we're probably going to put 17 in this year, actually.
Yeah. And because it's that small town, I think it's been really cool to see your reputation grow. There's a strong identity that you have in the community. The community loves you guys. Just really neat to see. There's been competitors that have obviously come in with the growth of the town, and they struggle to compete with the reputation, so it's been neat to watch that.
Yeah, we don't say it out loud, so hopefully nobody listens. But they don't want to come into our territory. No, we're welcome them in, but they'll just get crushed if they come compete with us.
Exactly. Yes.
Right,
so we get to smile about that often. Yeah. So what is interesting is, now that we've talked about kind of the size of your team, the size of your practice, I think most of our listeners would be very surprised to know that you have never had an office manager.
Not once.
No, and which is mind-blowing, I think, to a lot of people. So I wanted you in the studio today because I want to ask about why. Like, where did you know from the get-go that this was going to be your path? Or
of course not. I feel like I'm like every other dentist that came out of school and didn't know how to run a business, right? But I was very aware that running a business was super important, and so I tried to get as much knowledge as I could. But again, I had no idea what I was doing, and still to this day feel like I'm making it up as we go. So it's been this evolutionary process of growth that's happened, and because we had kind of really accelerated growth really fast, We've had to pivot and manage and have had to learn new things and try to figure things out. And multiple times we've talked about hiring an office manager. You know, you even hire the front desk and they think that they're the office manager, right? So we've had to fight against that. But I remember about 2012, 2013, I had some life experiences where I got caught up in kind of two organizations, bureaucratic companies, so to speak, that just really made me mad. I felt like me as an individual just got lost, that it didn't resonate with me, and nobody could give me an answer because everything was just cookie cutter, because that's our policy and that's just the way we do it. And that really just like bothered me, and it hurt me, and I was frustrated, and like, I mean, it fundamentally changed me, I think. And I don't know if it changed me for better or for good, but I remember thinking, man, I don't ever want to be in this situation again or cause somebody else to feel that they are just a number and that the policy is because you're just like everybody else. Yeah. And I don't know if that happens in the dental field, but I always envision that, you know, I want my hierarchy of the practice to be, the patient comes in, they deal with the person that answers the phone or the assistant, and if they can't answer the patient's question, then I want that getting elevated to me or one of my other doctors. Yeah. So it doesn't have to go through, and, you know, like, I mean, we've all been on the sales or the customer support calls. Yes. You know, can I speak to your manager? Well, I can't speak to my manager. Okay, here's the manager. The manager can't make the decision. I got to talk to this, and nothing ever gets done. And I didn't want my office to be that way. I didn't want my patients to feel that way about my office, because I was so burned when I got stuck in that situation. So, you know, 13 years, or 2013, however long ago that was, it kind of has shaped me that if I can, I fight against hiring a hierarchy or a bureaucracy in my dental office. Yeah.
What's really interesting, though, is I think it has served your practice well. I think most people would hear it's a large practice and this doc is managing things on his own, and that's got to be hard. And I'm not saying it's not hard, because we can talk about the hardships of that decision, but I actually think the benefits have outweighed the hardship.
Well, I think so, because I think we've had to be committed to it, and part of that is another dumb belief I have. Again, like, who knows if this is right, and my business model may not be right for everybody, but like, I really do believe that healthcare, or that dentistry is a healthcare, is a health science, and it's different than just a business. Right. And so being committed to the healthcare aspect of the patient means the more levels there are in the healthcare side of it, the harder it is for the patient to get better care. So we've also looked at it as, this is how the patients get good care, because it's essentially me and the patient, and then just a couple little people to help us facilitate getting that done. Yeah. So those two key principles we've had to like hold on to and believe in and fight through when those difficult times happen. Yeah. Yeah. I agree completely. And I think that direct connection that you've had with your patients in mostly good times, but even in the bad times when something has happened where there's been a frustration and they've been able to have that direct connection with you or your team, which we'll talk about how this has impacted your team, but your team is fantastic at, leveling some of that if need be, and protecting the practice from any kind of negative things that have popped up. But then if a patient does get to you, they're surprised that the solution to their problem is the doctor. Yeah. And that just doesn't happen. I mean, I had this happen 2 weeks ago where a patient was upset about something dumb. Yes. But like,
it's always something.
So like, one of the girls that was talking to him on the phone was like, he's like, I want to talk to the owner. And she's like, okay, I can have you. He's with the patient, but I can have him call you back. He's like, no, I know how this works. I know he's not going to call me back. It never works out that way. And she's like, well, I'll make sure he calls you. And he was like, okay, whatever. Well, 30 minutes later, I called him back, and the tone totally changed in his voice when he actually had to talk to somebody that could make the difference. And he backed down on a lot of his claims. And I was going to say, it does create some hardship. Like, I have to be brave enough to have these conversations that nobody wants to have, and I don't want to have them.
Right.
And you have to have the right people that are committed to the office. And so we can talk about the team and how we've had to work with them. But it's made an impact on the patients. The patients are surprised by it. I think that ultimately they appreciate it. And it gives them still a small town feel of this dental office. Yeah. So we're huge. We have technology. We have all this stuff, but we're always trying to make it feel like it's just one doctor, one patient, and keep it small.
And really, it is that. Even though it's huge, it really is one doctor, one patient. The way the appointment is structured, the access they have, if there is a problem, it really does boil down to one doctor, one patient. And not that couldn't happen with a manager, but it would be less likely for it to happen if there was a manager in place. That manager would want to step in and solve problems, and the doctor would have a safety net to kind of refer to in those moments. I think the tendency would be to rely on that manager, but because of this choice that you made many years ago, it's forced the one doctor, one patient connection.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that's better for healthcare. This isn't probably the space to pontificate on the problems of healthcare and where it is. I think we're all aware of that, but I think the more we can keep it one-to-one is important.
Yeah, I agree completely. So let's talk about, with this no manager model, what does that mean is on your plate? Or maybe what's not on your plate? Should that be the shorter list?
Well, I actually think one of the things that is the most important thing that I have to remind myself of is it's easy, and I think dentists and I think humans in general just want to be able to push the problem off to somebody else. The hard conversations are not fun. Everybody feels anxiety around those types of things. And so it'd be great just to be, you fix it. I don't want to deal with it. It's not my problem. And I understand that. Like, I want that. But I think I have to remind myself that doesn't usually make the problem any better. Maybe they can handle it and kind of get it to kind of go away. But if I'm brave enough to step through my anxiety and tackle the things that I need to tackle and show leadership in those things, then the outcome seems to be that much better. The patients feel better about it. The staff is confident in our ability to lead and handle things. They trust us that we're going to step up to the plate to do that. And so that's one of the harder parts. It's not necessarily that the problems are any more complicated, but it does require me to do the work to be brave enough. I don't know if that's the right answer, but like, it's not like I'm any braver than anybody else per se, but I have to tell myself to go out there and do that because the benefits outweigh just pushing the problem to somebody else. And so that is one of the harder parts, is it does take a little uncomfortableness to get through those things.
And it's almost like there's no choice but to engage in it. Like, what's the alternative?
Right.
When you've chosen this path, this no manager model path, a problem comes to your plate, and there's been plenty that have come to your plate, and there is no other option. It's like there's no choice but to power through and to be brave enough.
Like, I can't just hide. Like, I talk about this all the time. Like, patient will come in, they're upset or whatever, and then they're like, all right, Ludlow, they want to talk to you. And, like, it's like my staff thinks I want to have that conversation. Like, nobody wants to have it, but I can't just hide out in my office and just be like, okay, well, I'm too scared to go in there. Because there is no other choice. So I got to pull my pants up and say, okay, let's go do this. And 9 times out of 10, that conversation is always better than I thought it was going to be. Right? It's never as scary as you think it is, and the patient appreciates it. And, if it means I got to give something away to make the patient happy, I can make that decision. Right? I don't have to the office manager's got to talk to the doctor. Can we write this off? Can we do this? I can sit down and say, look, maybe this was my fault, or maybe this was your fault, but I'm going to do this for you. But I can make those decisions that are individually tailored for that patient at the right time, and I think it's better for me. It's better for the patient.
Well, and it fundamentally changes the conversation completely. Because if a patient knows they have to get through this manager to then get their problem solved, they're going to approach that manager in a certain way. If a doctor walks in, similar to this phone call that you were talking about, if a doctor steps into the conversation, it can be somewhat disarming to the patient.
I see that all the time. Like they think they're big, tough people to the staff. And then, I mean, I'm not a big guy. Like, I'm not in an imposing structure. But if I put my little white coat on and walk in there, all of a sudden they're nice and respectful and all this. Yeah. And so, yeah, it totally disarms them. And then, okay, now we can have a
decent conversation.
The emotions are a little bit toned down, and we can work towards a solution.
Yeah. And I think the other side of that is because you are pulling your pants up and getting into that conversation, you're actually experiencing patient feedback that you wouldn't normally experience.
Oh, 100%, right? Because then I'm like, all right, I don't want this to ever happen again. Whose problem was this? And now let's fix it, right?
Yes.
Where sometimes, staff doesn't want the doctors to know because they don't want to get in trouble. And then the patient's unhappy. The staff doesn't want to tell anybody. And I've never known that patient is unhappy, right? And now we know, okay, this was a breakdown, whether we messed up with our lab or our communication or whatever bad impression, I don't know, whatever the case is. Now I know, and we can work to address it. So it does kind of give more information, gives me more information about the health and the status of the practice.
It does.
For sure.
You're the front lines. I mean, you're literally experiencing that.
Yeah.
In a one-to-one situation. So there's no way for you to hide from that information or for the team to cover that information, and then you're able to solve problems. I feel like almost every monthly meeting we have, there is something that you're addressing from a we got to do better at this type standpoint, which you wouldn't know without you being the first line of defense.
Right. And I think we've made it seem like there's just a ton of problems. But I
think not.
But I think it's like every office has these problems.
Yes.
And we've worked hard, and this maybe we talk about what we've done to help the staff take ownership and fix those problems for us. But the problems are just going to arise. But I always feel like if I know about them, then we can fix them. Mm-hmm. And then the more we fix them, then they don't come up as much. Now we've resolved it, right? Yeah. Instead of just pushing it away and not wanting to know about it because that makes me feel better, it doesn't fix the problem.
Right.
So, yeah.
And potentially even grows the problems.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So we've got a better chance of kind of nipping things in the bud if we're willing to engage in those uncomfortable conversations. And you're right. I think one of the things that I love about your practice is how well things are run. But in a size practice that you have, there's going to be patient issues that pop up, at least a few times a month that we've got to deal with. And I think it would be very easy in any practice, but especially in a larger practice, to go, let me put somebody in to handle those problems. But then I think the practice owner misses out on opportunities to improve the team.
I think so, right? I mean, obviously, business models with office managers work, right? And so I think sometimes it's got to be dependent on the dentist and their personalities and all of that. But because I do care very much about the reputation of my office, I do care about, maybe from more past trauma, what people think of us, that is important to me. And so, yeah, I want to know about it. I want to work to fix it. I want to make sure that we don't have those problems. And it makes me feel better at the end of the day to know that, well, at least I know what's going on. And then I can defend myself. If I either got to take ownership that we screwed up, or I can say, look, we did everything we can here. This isn't our fault.
Yeah.
And it gives me added confidence.
Yeah, for sure. So I think having no manager, of course, means problems hit your plate. First and only, really, for the most part. They're going to hit you. So you're having to deal with those head on. Also, you're having to deal with team stuff as well. So not just patient problems that might pop up, but anything that a manager would do from a staff standpoint, I say falls to your plate as well.
Yeah. And that's where I think that with your help, we've kind of grown to kind of eliminate some of those problems. That I think is the other problem that dentist hates, probably just because I hate it as well, is the staff, right? It's like, staff always causes problems. I mean, I know listening to Dr. Kuba talk about it, right? Like,
just plenty of problems.
Yeah, so right. So she's not alone in that. And, like, we all feel that way. So that is a constant battle, but if you have the right people, that can help for a lot of that. And if you have some of the right systems to say, just as easy, well, did you talk to the person about that? And then so we can kind of get rid of the drama problems that really I don't need to know about. And then giving the staff ownership of their own role to say, look, we're trusting you to be the very best in this. I need you to take care of as much as you can take care of, knowing that these are our core principles of how to make. We want the patients to always be happy about our office. Even when we tell them no, they're going to be grateful that we told them no. So if we give them those tools and the confidence to say, we're trusting you, then a lot of those staffing problems aren't quite as heavy as they can be.
I think this is a key component here that we may need to spend a minute on, because it's one thing to just talk about a no manager model versus a manager model. But I think the staff is critical in the ability to have a no manager model. And I think over the years you've invested tons of time and energy to, first of all, make sure you've got the right team members, but also to give them this autonomy to take care of the patients in a certain way under your vision of what you want. But you've put a lot of time and effort and energy into making sure that your team is calibrated to perform in a similar way with their own little personalities. They can add their flair to it, but there's a very clear expectation of patient care, but also not this overbearing, like, I'm the doctor, I'm the owner, you must perform this way. You've given a lot of trust to your team in carrying out your vision.
Yeah, and I've always, for better or worse, I've always thought that a lot of patients will go to the office not because of the dentist, but because of the staff and how the staff makes them feel, whether it's the hygienist, how the phones are answered, the assistants, whatever. And if the patients feel really comfortable with the staff, then sometimes the doctor's just ancillary. And that's fine with me. I don't need that praise. If I go away, that's great. And so I've always taken that, like, hey, I'm just kind of back here in the back to help do dentistry when needed. But if I get the patients liking my staff, liking my office, then if I'm not there and my associate steps in, they're still okay with that. And so, yeah, like we try to make the appointments similar no matter who the patients are seeing, a lot of that calibration, and then telling the staff, this is our vision, this is what we're about. And this is, if you want an office manager, we certainly can do that. Or you can be adult and do your job and get it done, and then we can take that money that we're going to pay office manager and spread it out in bonus or whatever, and we trust you to act like an adult and just do your job. And if you have the right people, then I think they can thrive in that.
And I think it attracts those type of people. Right. Which anytime I have the ability to talk to a candidate before they're considered for your office, that's what I tell them, is like, this is an office where you really do show up, you perform to the best of your ability, and you have a lot of autonomy, the ability to make an impact on those patients in your own way under this vision. And so I think people who want that are attracted to that, which then creates a team full of people who are autonomous and executing.
But it doesn't mean we don't miss sometimes.
Exactly.
But we're aware of it, and so then now we can correct it and fix it, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it means no manager means you are dealing with the problems, both patient and staff. What else do you feel like is on your plate that would potentially be offloaded to a manager?
Well, I mean, even specific tasks of, I still run the payroll with this many people, right? That's probably something I could delegate. But again, I kind of like it takes me 10 minutes. It's not that hard. And I kind of like knowing the numbers. I kind of like seeing that. It makes the staff turn in extra days to me. And so they still kind of know that, hey, I'm in charge here.
There's accountability there.
Yeah. So little things like that still are on my plate,
Even down to like hiring as well.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're involved
So,
in that.
we've worked out kind of a system, but I'm still involved in the hiring where I'm doing kind of the initial screening to say like, hey, are you good enough to work in our office, or do I like you enough to be here? So yeah, there are certain things that still like that come to me that could be passed off to an office manager.
And same thing being, I feel like you're involved with practice trends, very knowledgeable on what's going on from a, reporting type standpoint. A lot of times the managers will take that over, but that's always been you.
Right. I like to, I just think it's important that I know what's going on. And sure, an office manager could do that, and they could spit out a nice report for me. And I have things that some reports people do for me, because it's just smarter that way. But also, like when we have team training meetings, I'm leading out in all of those training meetings, from vision setting to customer service to even details of, cements, or whatever.
Yeah, down to putting the agenda together. I mean, for monthly team meetings or your quarterly trainings, I mean, the agenda is birthed out of your either the things you've interfaced with that need to be addressed, or vision that you need to cast. I mean, the agenda, which again, a lot of times a manager would take that over and create that for the doctor. So, I guess my other question would be, has there been points, and I know there have been, but have there been points where you thought about a manager, and why? What was the point of pain that made you think about?
Yeah, I mean, like, it seems like every other year we're talking about, it's the time to hire somebody. Part of it, I think, depends on, like, sounds silly, I guess, but sometimes it depends on where my mental state is and how well am I taking care of myself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if I'm not doing the things that I need to do to protect, like, my mental health or my physical health, or just manage stuff in my own personal life, when those types of things kind of get out of control, then it's like, okay, I don't want to deal with any problems at work either. Let's find somebody else to take care of that. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's just because of the drama of staff that's just like, oh, I'm so tired of dealing with the same thing. So those will drive it. Sometimes you think, well, it's so big, this is what everybody else does. Do I need to do that? Yeah. I mean, so it does come up, but I don't know why we just keep going back to, okay, well, if these are the reasons we're feeling this, then let's fix the reasons why we're feeling it. If those are things that we can handle ourselves, then let's go do it, and we'll be better in that long run.
And it's pretty interesting to see that with you in particular, is that because you hit those points and you push through, it's like, well, okay, yes, I could kind of hit the easy button and tag in a manager here, but you have consistently chosen, let me actually just power through, because it is something I can handle. And I think what it's created is this, and I'm going to put words over you have never said this, but almost like there's not going to be a problem that you can't handle. I think when you choose, when your mantra comes back to, I'm going to power through, and I can push through this, and I can solve this, and I know I can figure this out. I think what it creates is a resilience that can be something that's not as possible for people who have an easy button.
Right. And partially I think I'm convinced is that easy button doesn't exist. Like, I'm not totally bought in that I could just hire the manager and they're going to fix my problems.
Right.
I just still think they're going to get true up to me. It's just she's going to be the one telling me the problems, and instead of her, or he, let me tell me all those problems instead of everybody else. But I think you're right. As I've grown up as an adult and through this whole process, I have learned to trust that we can figure it out. Now, I've been super blessed in that I'm surrounded by a ton of good people. Like, I got you on my team. Our doctors, they're fabulous.
Phenomenal.
Right? So I can trust them, and when I'm like struggling with something, I talk to them about it. It's very collaborative. I know that they got they want the best for the office as well. I got advisors outside of the practice that I can rely on. So I'm super blessed to have people that I know I could trust that are going to buoy me through. And so that's important. But I'll tell you, like, as I've gotten older, I feel in myself a confidence of, yeah, well, I mean, we'll figure it out. It's going to be okay. Yeah. It's going to be okay. And so I don't have the anxiety of, it's all going to go hit the fan.
Yeah.
It's, well, we've worked through it. We'll work through it again, and it's going to be okay.
It creates this pattern of behavior of, okay, we've done this before.
Yeah.
We can do this again.
Totally. And because I don't believe that the easy button is going to fix it all, maybe we're just biased in our outcome. I feel like once we push through, then we've come out better for it.
Yeah.
Right? And I just have to remember that that's the pattern when I want to.
Yeah. When things get hard, you're like, okay, wait a second.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, oh, let's just sell out the corporate and be done.
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't fix the problem. It just makes it go through.
Problem.
Yeah, it makes it just go through more cycles before it gets to you. Right?
That's so true.
So, I don't know. That's just how I see it. But we've been really blessed that every time we've done that, like, the office is still in business, you know?
Yeah.
I keep thinking next month nobody's going to show up for hygiene, but they keep showing up. So, so it's been kind of nice. And again, like, it's not greatness that we've done. It's just the evolution of that, right? I mean, I'm just as anxious and nervous and scared and weak as anybody else. But the more I work on myself, the more I pay attention to it, the more I'm brave and say, okay, well, there's no other place to go but fight through it.
Yeah.
Then it makes it easier the next time.
Yeah. It creates a confidence that's like, okay, we do have this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because I know what's going on in my office, then I don't have to be like, oh, well, maybe we did mess up here or whatever.
Yeah. You're well informed.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah, we did mess up. I'm sorry. I'm going to fix this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a real upside. And a lot of people don't. I think that's a subtlety. Mm-hmm. That's a side benefit of this model is, first of all, the level of intimacy you have with the practice because you are the front lines, but then also the resilience that you develop as you power through these hurdles and solve problems. You start to feel like, okay, not that there's an arrogance about it, but there's a calm confidence that, okay, we've powered through before, we can power through again.
Yeah, and it probably comes across as arrogance. People think I'm cocky, but like, but it's just the cockiness is just covering up for my insecurities. Yeah, it's more just a confidence and a lack of anxiety. Like, I just don't feel it anymore because it's gonna be fine. Yeah, we're gonna be okay, which is nice. It's relaxing. It just feels good, right? And so if it's confidence, great too. But like, I also describe it as I'm just not worried about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I do think that comes from you being so engaged in it and being able to solve as you go along. Now, I do, there was a point, I guess it was maybe about this time last year that you and I got together, and I feel like it had just been a year of you being hit with problem after problem after problem and really feeling like you were on your own in some ways. And you and I kind of strategized some things to disperse some of that responsibility. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how that's worked for you?
Yeah, so it's been great. Like, it got to the point where, you know, it felt like everything was my responsibility and my problem. Well, I also had a partner, so some of it should have been his problem too. And that's probably me not sharing enough with him, not asking for help, and all the stuff that I could have done better to get that off my plate. So we sat down and talked about it, and we came up with the DRIs. Is that what we're calling them? Yeah, the direct responsible individuals. And so basically, we came back to the team and said, look, there are certain things in the practice that need to be managed, whether it's ordering supplies, whether it's customer service, it's scheduling, because we have a big schedule. And so we gave each a person in each department that responsibility. So we have a person that's in charge of the schedule, that's a hygienist, a front desk person, and an assistant. And so if we got to plan the schedule or people aren't scheduling right, those are the people that are responsible for fixing it. And so if I got a problem with the schedule, I just go to that person and say, hey, can you get with this? We need to fix this. Same thing with supplies. We have a customer service department on each of those. So if there's a problem where the patients aren't happy, then those are the people that are designed to fix it. And they have the autonomy to fix it. If they don't know how to fix it, then they need to come talk to me. And usually what happens is they will fix it and then come back to me and say, hey, I just want you to know this kind of happened. We took care of it. This is what we did. It's going to be okay, but I thought you might want to know. And that's exactly what I want to know, right? I don't want to know, I want to know what's going on, but I don't have to be the one to fix it, right? Yeah. So giving them those individual responsibilities has played out great, right? And they got the title. Everybody knows who's responsible for it. And then when somebody comes to me like, hey, they messed up on the schedule. Okay, well, why don't you go talk to the person that's in charge of the schedule? That's not my problem anymore, right? My partner took over kind of the clinical directorship, so he's in charge of materials, how we're doing our procedures. So he's the clinical director, and I'm kind of more of advancement and where we want the practice to go. And so that helped divide the roles. So having clear divided responsibilities for everybody is not wrong, and it's good. Yeah. And I think it's helped them even take more ownership. So now their practice, it feels like it's their practice. Yeah. And they're defensive of it. They want it to grow. They want it to be better. They know that the better we do, the more they're going to make too. Yeah. But it's even not about the money sometimes. It's about, man, this is my job and I love it. They trust me here and I'm growing something along with it, which is sometimes more important than money these days. Yeah,
it feels good and also is financially rewarding for them. And I think it's been pretty neat to see, because I feel the team members really haven't changed, which is pretty remarkable in this, because this was all coming to your plate before with the same team, but just that confidence that you placed in them. Yeah. To be able to tell them, hey, you 3 people on scheduling, I trust you with this. Go solve it. And to me, it does mimic a lot of the really successful corporations out there. I always come back and think about Zappos because I did a lot of research on them. And they equipped their customer service reps with the autonomy and authority to solve customer complaints in any way that they see fit. And Zappos developed a fantastic reputation for their customer service because they had these people that were the front lines and they knew the buck stopped with them. The solution rests on me. And I think that shift happened with your team because, again, the confidence you placed in them to go, I am trusting you with this. And there's some structural components to it. They need to get together. The 3 people on the schedule need to get together and meet every so often. And in meetings, if something comes up, sometimes you'll give them the floor to be like, okay, scheduling department, what do you think about this? So I think there's some implicit structure there that's happened, but the relief it's provided you, I think, has been pretty neat to see, because it also has benefited the team. It's not just, oh, good, let me tap out. Right. So what I think is happening is, which I'm hoping, maybe I'm just wishful thinking here, is absolutely right. The team has taken that and they've felt empowered. They've done well. They've taken stuff off of my plate, which has helped grow the practice, because now it's not just me trying to fix everything, which I don't have time for. So that's been great for the practice. And then it's freed me up to go and work on stuff that can still advance the practice. And then they're seeing some of that, where they're seeing some of the growth and the cool different things that we're trying to do in there, that it's almost like this reinforcement cycle that can be, that seems to be working okay right now. Win-win. Yeah, for sure. And again, I think we may reach another point where we have to pivot again. I think as we look back at kind of this no manager model, I think you've along the way had to pivot a lot. Totally. And I actually, we talk about that all the time, that even though we're big, because we're not corporately owned, because there's not a lot of bureaucracy, we're able to be nimble and move when we need to. If the market's changing, if dentistry's changing, or if we need to move how we do our technology, crown press, whatever, right? That we're nimble and we can move and move through that.
And I think that's a huge advantage.
It really is.
And so that's played out really well for us. And we can always hire an office manager. We can always go back and do that, right? And maybe there'll be a time when we need to do that. I'm not against that. Well, kind of, I guess I am against that model, but but there may be a time when we need to do that, and that'll be okay too. But because we know what's going on, we're able to make those decisions when it's time to do that.
Well, and I think if the time comes for that, which I honestly don't foresee that will happen for you, but if the time comes for that, you'll have a very clear expectation of what you want out of that manager. And I would imagine you would be very forward thinking and making sure you're still very connected with the practice, the patient experience, the team. I can't see you being the type that's just like, you take it all.
Right. And I think it actually has helped my teammates too, because I don't think they like the bureaucracy of some things as well either, right? So now they're not caught in a bureaucratic environment. It's like, I got a problem, let's fix this together as a team. If not, then okay, let's get one of the doctors involved and let's get this fixed and we're done.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to call the office manager. The office manager got to talk to the doctor, and the doctor doesn't know what he's doing anyway. So let's call the office manager back or whatever, right? So not only is it beneficial for the patient, I do think it has some advantages or I think the team likes that.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I would have hated that we missed that point. I do think that your team, because it's a large team, but I think you have a connection with them it's there because of the no manager model.
Yeah.
I don't think you would have the same relationship with them, nor them with you, with a manager as the go-between, because that really is what a manager is intended to do, is to navigate doctor and staff relationships. Right. And so because there is no middle woman, you're there as the point person. And I think it's developed over these years a lot of loyalty. I feel like you've got a team that's very loyal to you. Yeah,
I think so. We're losing people because we're getting rid of them, not because they're quitting or going someplace else. And, I have employees that have been there for 18 years now.
Yeah.
17 years. Hygienist has been there since 2000. I think Angela started in 2006.
Yeah.
So long time. Long time. And, as anybody knows, turnover is a hassle, and so having people that are loyal and are good and working does end up making my job as the manager a lot easier, because we're not having to we're only hiring because we're growing. Right. We're not having we got to fire this person or this person quit, now we got to go find somebody else. I don't have that. It's like we hire somebody because we need somebody, or we don't like you anymore. Bye-bye. So that is helpful, right? Having a good team like that appreciates that, and we can trust to do that, means I don't have to manage as much stuff as some of the other managers might need to be.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the word trust, and I think that's a key word there, that there's a strong trust relationship between the team and you and the team. And I think that does create extremely good retention. If we really sit here and think about it, the amount of retention that so many people fight for has been, and I think it's more than just the no manager model, but I think that's key there. You've done a lot of other things to make it a very career place for people, but I think there's extreme loyalty to you, and I think that's because of the no manager model. So
I think it helps.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. So do you think we've convinced everybody that's listening?
Just fire your office manager. It's worked out really good for us, but I don't know if it's the right model for everybody.
Yeah.
It does require, but I had a mentor that when I first got started, and he was just a big believer that doctor-led offices can be really more successful than other types of offices. Yeah. And that's always resonated with me. He was big on hey, but if you're going to be a leader, you got to do the work as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly reminding myself that I have to get better, that I have to do the work, and I got to take ownership of it. But I think the rewards and the benefits has paid out that way.
Too.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like anything. Sometimes the harder work produces the better results, and if that's you and it works, then that's awesome.
Yeah.
But it may not work for everybody, but we've been really blessed
And I hope if nothing else, it's, again, like you said, I think there's plenty of manager models out there that can work, but I don't think we talk about the no manager model enough. I think it's just kind of natural. We assume at some point we'll be big enough that we need a manager so I appreciate you coming into the space to be able to go, okay, no, I've got a really big practice, and it's a no manager led practice, and it can work. And there can be some extreme benefits. And I mean, you and I talk about this. There's never been a point that I've been at where I would recommend a manager for your practice, because I think it would fundamentally break some of the things that are so strong about it. Mm-hmm. So it not only can work, but I think it can work really well.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, we're just making it up as we go, but like it's been a fun ride, and you know, we've been lucky that we've been able to make some mistakes and learn from them, and it hasn't destroyed the office, and because we've had good people that have come along for the ride, and my staff talks all the time that, you know, I'm always moving their cheese or changing it, and so I'm grateful that they've come along this journey with us, but because they've been willing to do that, and because we've been able to put in the hard work, like it's working. Yeah, it's been a lot of blessings that we've gotten out of that. Yeah. And so I'm grateful for that.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for joining me and talking about it today. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll come back.
You have to.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see how many people listen.
As a matter of fact, Kuba gave me a long list of her topics that I was supposed to talk about with you, and we got to none of those.
Okay,
so you got to come back.
Well, if she says I need to come back, then anything for Kuba.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.